So um, my my degree was in geography. But I always wanted to have a job in the city. I always imagined coming to work in London, having grown up in the market town of Ipswich, um, in England. And I joined a consulting company. It was Pricewaterhouse at the time. They ran a graduate program for IT consulting for people, regardless of their degree background. So I saw it as a great opportunity to try lots of different businesses within a business. So consulting gave you the opportunity to be able to have a 6 months assignment in one company and then sort of a year somewhere else, and whilst developing a career. So that's where I started. And even then, that was IT, and IT in financial services. So before anything was called fintech, but by definition, technology led roles and organizations was pretty male dominated. But I don't think I really thought about it in that way at the time. It just was what it was. And, I was, able to stand my ground. There was, the roles were all based on brains rather than brawn. So it really didn't matter whether you're a male or female. And it wasn't particularly called out one way or the other. I came into payments almost accidentally. I took following my number of years at Pricewaterhouse, became PwC, that became IBM. I then worked as a program manager in the sort of the traditional project sense, putting in place transformation programs for the likes of Aviva, the insurance company, BP as well. And then I actually took a number of years off where I was effectively playing second fiddle to my husband, whose career continued whilst we started a family. I did try initially going back to work when my after my first was born, but I actually found that it was incredibly difficult to manage not being able to put everything to my job and being the last to pick up from nursery and the guilt associated with that, and not being able to put effort into my relationship. So I felt that I was doing 3 jobs badly. Yeah. So in fact, once I was expecting my second, or I had my second, and then my husband's job moved overseas, it became the right excuse really to not try and do everything, and focus on looking after the family and letting my husband's career take off. Because what I found was otherwise was we would get to 5 o'clock and I'd be phoning him up and we would be sort of debating whose meeting was more important and who was going to get back for nursery pickup. And I'm sure that that's sort of something that resonates. So I got into fintech, actually having taken 7 years out of paid employment. I was doing charity work and things, but 7 years out of paid employment, and I got back into it almost as a returnship program. Started off 2 days a week, and my confidence was shot at the beginning. I wouldn't have gone into a C-level role for sure, but as my confidence resumed, I rose within the company and am where I am today. It was 4 years between where I joined GPS and becoming CEO. I was COO after 18 months or 2 years, but it was a smaller company at the time. But genuinely, I wouldn't have gone into that role. And I thought whilst I'd had the period out of paid employment, I thought I'd been doing all the things I needed to do to maintain confidence, because within the charity work that I was doing, I was still organizing committee meetings, I was organizing events, I was speaking at events, I was doing some media briefings, I was talking to politicians and things. So I thought I was still doing things, and then sort of also keeping up with, the next version of email or Excel or, whatever it was to maintain skills. But nonetheless, you know, being out of the workplace, even the language I used had simplified. Because if you spend 7 years where the majority of your conversation is towards your toddlers, you're using a very narrow range of language, and you realize you're not using the breadth of vocabulary. So it's even simple things like that uh do wane, they do deteriorate over time. So I'm keen to talk about it just because there are very few cases out there of people that have been in, come fully out of full-time employment, then gone fully back in, and then being able to resume a career and a career trajectory. It's about organizations creating the opportunity. They're starting to come about, but there's still very few returnship opportunities out there. That's what it's called, where you can come back on a 2-day-a-week basis and have a role that could grow over time as you sort of find your feet again. So I think it's super important for organizations to create those opportunities and see the potential in people. And then finally, I think it's really important to be getting out there, sharing some of these examples, some of these case studies, so that whole army of parents who are at home at the moment thinking that there is no point in thinking about going back to work, there is no opportunity for them, to be able to start to show the various role models to say it is possible. I think I grew up as one of Thatcher's children, effectively, believing that, you could have it all, you could do everything. But we kind of create this kind of impossible bar for ourselves in that regard, in terms of, being that high flying executive and being a successful partner and parent of high flying children that are doing all the extracurricular activities without depending on an army of nannies. It becomes this almost impossible bar for ourselves. But one of the things that, I've been seeking to explore is, well, maybe you can have it all, but not at the same time. And, you can have your life in stages, and be able to achieve things at different points in your career and in your life. It's a topic that I'm particularly passionate about. As you say, I know that, even just as a female leader in this space, that's reasonably rare. Turning that into a female that's a mother, and then a mother that's taken time out and returned again, that's becoming even more rare. And I'm determined to use the fact that, I'm at the driving seat, to be able to really think about creating the right kind of opportunities for others. One of the things that I've recognized is that, with the Me Too movement, women have currently got the mic, as in we've got the ability to speak, and people are listening, and there are efforts in multiple companies to look at and sort of address gender diversity. But what I recognize is that whilst I've got the opportunity to hold the microphone, whether it's in this conversation or in many others, there are various groups within thinking about sort of diversity, whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's religion, whether it's lots of different aspects, disability, whatever. And not every one of those groups is going to get their turn in holding the microphone. Therefore, whilst I've got the microphone, what I want to do is really look at addressing a number of the root causes of of there being sort of inequality of opportunity, really analyzing what privilege means, for example, and being able to address whether it's the way that we recruit, where we recruit from, how we define our culture, how we promote, how we recognize and reward, and make sure that all of those processes are fully inclusive, such that everyone's benefiting. And one of the ways that we have actively sought to address that is we've got a phenomenal program at the moment called Advancing Black Pathways. And this was my response, or then collectively our response, to the brutalities of the George Floyd murder last year, and how a number of organizations are seeking to lean in to consider what organization they're creating for for their Black colleagues inside the building, and opportunities for those that are not around as yet. And one of the things that's been very important to me in anything that I do, I never want to play lip service. I never want to just put the black square on Twitter to represent whatever, and then the rainbow square on another day, etc., etc. I want to be doing something meaningful. And I'd also rather do something that I'd rather lean in more heavily in certain areas than try and sort of do a scattering of efforts across, to please a wide number of groups. And so we've developed this program, Advancing Black Pathways, which is pretty brave. It is touching topics that they can be seen to be political. There are you can say things that can be taken, if they're taken out of context, can be difficult. But I genuinely believe in leaning in and trying to do something that again can be a shining beacon of what good looks like, to be able to help share with other organizations. So there are then a number of initiatives that sit underneath that, which I could go on about all day. But we've got a program of activities at the moment that our team internally are all very proud of, and that will increasingly become sort of apparent when we're able to. I want to walk the talk first and then talk about it. And so that's what we're doing. So when I started at GPS, that was back in 2013. I think already the world's moved on since then, because there was certainly a sense, particularly with the conference circuit, for example, that it wasn't necessarily a place for women. I know there was some going, but certainly those in my organization, suggested that I was better off staying in the office, even though I really wanted to be able to go and see my customers and my partners as well. I think in part, though, I also created some of the barriers for myself, because people would say to me, you're new to GPS. Oh, how long have you been there? These are typical questions. How long have you been there? I've been there 6 months, year, whatever. They say, oh, where were you before? And I hid the fact that I had been, a stay-at-home mum for a number of years. So I used to say, oh, well, my previous career was in consulting. And I think that's really interesting. I've stopped doing that now, because I realize I'm doing a disservice to A, the journey I've been on, and B, the story it gives for others. Because I was genuinely embarrassed about having taken the time out. And yet, those people that I'm speaking to, they've got wives and sisters and daughters, and they need to know themselves that there are sort of these alternate career paths and opportunities available. As CEO, I'm the only female director of the company, and so by definition, the board meetings, it's me in a sea of men who are very accommodating, but I needed to learn that I needed to have almost a different voice in order to be heard. And what that means is you can think that you've been direct and you can think you've been assertive, but it's not necessarily heard by people in their roles. They may be so thick-skinned that you think you've given somebody a telling off, and it's been water off a duck's back to them. So actually, in order to be heard, you can need to sometimes behave outside of your comfort zone and not be true to yourself in order to really be heard. And the way I've described it is, that can be the way that you need to operate in order to be heard. But you do then need to tack back and forth. You do need to also be your true self, because what you need to achieve in order to create true diversity at the board table is to enable other people to come into that board who can also be heard. So you need to educate, you need to tack. So you need to be heard and you need to behave in certain ways in order to be heard. But then you need to be able to also educate and talk in your voice, such that you are actually getting a change in approach that facilitates that diversity over time. I live in a world of analogies, and I've described this one as it's like in a sailing boat, you can't sail completely into the wind. What you need to do is tack one side and then tack forward, tack left, tack right. And that way you can make the progress forwards. And that's the way I think that we make the most progress as those that are sort of breaking the glass ceiling, those that are achieving the more senior leadership roles. It's about tacking, because if you just sit there in I'm using voice, and I don't, it's not necessarily a voice, but it's the way that you speak. If you sit there and assume you're going to be heard because you're there, that might not work. Sometimes you need to be able to lean forward, as in not be true to your authentic self, and kind of quite literally thump the table in order to say, do you hear me? This is what you need to do. This, you need to listen to me on this. And then you can revert to your authentic self to be able to take that conversation forward, to take it through. I think the opportunities are extraordinary. And I think it's important to recognize that there are, there's not a single approach. I think being authentic to yourself is important. I think the point that I'm making in terms of needing to tack is that when you're the first woman through the door, there is a certain way of getting that door open and getting through. But once you're through, you need to change tack in order to be able to open up for others. Yeah. Because we're not achieving anything as sort of women in fintech, in sort of the diversity equation, if the only way to be accepted is to be, as macho as the men, or more macho than men, or more similar to the men. You haven't achieved anything for anybody else. You might need to do that in order to open the door. but it's important to remember who you are and make sure that you are, creating that ladder. You're opening the door, you're holding it open for others to follow in your footsteps. So, coming back to your question as to what other women should do who are interested in coming into fintech, or they're interested in progressing their careers, build a network is a great way forwards, whether it's inside your company or outside. Use LinkedIn, go to attend webinars, reach out to people that you've seen speak and just link in with them. Say, I really enjoyed listening to you on this, would really appreciate sort of connecting. People respond really positively to that kind of thing. And, there are a whole host of allies out there. I think there's a host of incredibly talented, capable, and enthusiastic women out there to find, to onboard. It's the case of looking in the right places. I honestly believe that choosing the right, recruitment support makes a huge difference, whether it's internal or the recruitment agencies or headhunters. We certainly found that using a different headhunter for senior exec roles brought very different results from a diversity and inclusion standpoint. We made it a key criteria, and it made a very big difference. And also, think twice as to what you're sort of mandating as the entry criteria for the role, because in many roles, the attitude that an individual brings, very, very soon outweighs the level of, the number of years experience or the direct relevance of experience, because the specifics on a role can often be taught inside the company. The attitude is inherent. So, you have to sort of think hard about what you're looking for, how you're qualifying people out. I mean, the role, I've got to where I am, I would probably have been qualified out of so many roles because I'd had 7 years out of work. And so then assumptions were made about me in terms of, would I be committed, would have been out of touch, whatever it was. So, making sure that your recruitment approach and processes isn't excluding people for the wrong reasons, I think is really, really important. I think one of the key aspects that we can do is more of these kind of things, shining a light on the many examples of females who are, really being incredibly successful, not necessarily, at my level, but we've got a broad range of, successful females across all departments. And, they don't necessarily get that moment in the spotlight to shine in order to be able to then demonstrate to others that this is what good looks like. And to an extent, there is a natural sort of tendency more for females to have what we call imposter syndrome. So you assume you're not as good as your peers. You assume that, oh no, I wouldn't want to speak on this interview or webinar because I don't know enough, that, somebody won't find me interesting or whatever. And so I do think we need to help a lot of females, a lot of people generally, actually, sort of get over those concerns, because we absolutely want to hear from a full spectrum of people.